I was raised by my grandparents in New Zealand. They owned a business in the islands, and as a result, they had 20 employees. One of them who I'll call Rex. Rex's father was adopted by my grandmother's father. After Rex's father died, Rex became close to my family, and he would do jobs here and there, and my grandfather would pay him. My mother lived in the islands due to some legal issues she had. I never had a good relationship with her or my half-sisters that I was raised with. This is relevant to what I will detail later. I was constantly bullied by my half-sisters because I wasn't their real sister, and if I were to complain to the adults, no one really took me seriously. One of my sisters and I would accompany my grandparents to the islands, and on one of these occasions, my sister led one of her boyfriend's friends into the house, where he then forced me to get intimate with him. I was only 12 years old at the time. I was encouraged at that young age that it was cool to lose your virginity and to keep doing it, with friends who would tell me good job, making me feel as if it was a great thing. I didn't tell any adults because I thought that no one would listen to me, and because of my small brain, it was supposed to be cool. These are all relevant to my story regarding Rex. My life eventually fell apart and I got into drinking and smoking. My grandparents made me stay in the islands with my mother who had abandoned me when I was 2 months old. On one occasion, one of my stepdad's friends broke into my room while drunk, and he tried to do you-know-what to me that night. I remember him shushing me as my stepdad then knocked on the door to check if I was alright. I used this opportunity to leap to the door and dash out. My stepdad found him and then pushed him out of the house. As I was crying on the couch, my stepdad explained to my mother what had just happened. My heart dropped when I heard my mom ask him, "Are you sure that she didn't bring him in herself and then just pretend as if he came in on his own?" To which my stepdad replied, I'm pretty sure. She's crying on the couch." Everything I went through was ignored and not thought of, so I was always scared to tell anyone what was going on. Rex was unmarried, childless, and illiterate. I remember one incident when I was young that he tried to force me to sit between his legs. I was only 6 years old at the time. I remember that he tried to kiss me and I ran away. At 13, I was way too young to smoke, and so I used to hide at the back of our house and smoke. Rex found out about this and began to give me a smokes. He would tell me that I should smoke first and then he would finish it because he said that it felt like he was kissing my lips. He would constantly break into my room at night and steal my undergarments, and then he would replace them with new ones. He also told me a few times that I shouldn't wash them after I shower. More than once we would sit together while smoking, and I would move as far away from him as I could. He would purposely put a hole in his pants and let his you-know-what hang out, and he would tell me to look at it. He told me that he would masturbate and think of me. I was so scared to tell anyone, and I just kept it to myself, seeking comfort in the wrong places and people. One day after I had a shower, I went to get changed in my room. My room is next to the kitchen, and I knew that there was a hole on the top part of the wall, a very small one. I was never worried about it though because one, it was way too high for someone to just look through it. One would have to stand on the counter and tiptoe to see through it. And then two, I never thought that anyone would go through all that trouble. So I slowly got changed because it was quite hot that day, and then I noticed that the hole in the wall was now blocked. I thought nothing of it because anyone could have just patched it up. I had heard my stepdad walking toward the kitchen at the same time, and then the hole appeared again. I thought that was strange, so I just stared at the hole. I heard my stepdad walk out, turn the car on, and then drive off. To my horror, something had blocked the hole in the wall. I legit realized that it was an eye looking right at me through that hole. I grabbed my towel and then rushed to the kitchen to then find Rex staggering down from the bench, acting like nothing had happened. I grabbed a knife and then threatened him with tears welling in my eyes. I told him that if he ever did that again, I would kill him. He then just smirked, and I then walked off to put on my clothes. I had heard knocking on my door, and as I opened it, he just stood there glaring at me. He then forced himself inside, and he told me he was done playing around, that I should just lie down and give him what he wanted. As you can imagine, I stood there horrified. I was so emotionally and psychologically damaged. I was only 13 while this was going on. Something inside me was saying that maybe if I were to give him what he wanted, he would finally leave me the fuck alone. But then I looked at him properly in the face, and I just felt so disgusted. I yelled at him and I told him if he didn't get out, that I would tell everyone what he was doing to me. He smirked and then walked out again. He knew that my mother would always be on his side at all times. My life kind of spiraled out a bit, and I had no understanding of what depression really was. I just felt like my life was ruined. So I kind of just let myself go in regards to smoking, drinking, and unfortunately, sleeping in places and with people that I should not have been sleeping with or at, mostly because of their ages and marital status. I was once dating this dude who was 13 years older than me. I know, and I'm sorry. It was really stupid and I was 16. I felt unloved, and I was looking for someone who could possibly love me back. Well, I was talking to him late at night behind my house. I saw a big block of wood fly across our heads. I then glanced in the direction where the wood came from, and there stood Rex, huffing and puffing, holding a machete, ready to fight the guy that I was talking to. I walked inside the house, and my grandmother was devastated, saying that I was a whore and I'm an embarrassment to the family. Well, the next day I cried to them, and I told them that I think I was like this because of what Rex did to me. My grandmother just responded by then saying, "Oh what? He just slapped your butt, that's it." To which my aunt then says, "Well, you were caught with a dude before and Rex didn't do anything to you until after that happened," which was a completely different incident that happened when I was 15. So the one time I was going to open up to them, I was pushed aside. He would disgustingly leave graphic magazines in my room. He would come into my room early hours of the morning and then stare at me sleeping. This went on for about a year or two. Rex also tried to do similar things to my younger sister, but my mother and stepfather made sure that he wouldn't, which kind of made me mad because I felt like they could have done the same thing for me but didn't. I was taken back to New Zealand when I was 15 after I ran away from home. The neglect that I felt from my mother and her husband was real, and I went to go live with my cousins and their family where I actually felt that I was more accepted. Once I came back to New Zealand, I had picked myself up. I went back to high school, aced my grades, and I started working at 17. I wanted to help my grandmother pay for my school fees, my lunch, and etc. My best friend from the islands had introduced me to my then boyfriend and now husband of almost 4 years. I'm actually currently in university. I believe in America they call it college, and I'm a second-year student. My husband and I have our issues, mostly financial, but the love that I get from him I've never gotten in my whole life. We're just a young couple trying to succeed in life. I truly believe that if it weren't for the grace of God, I wouldn't have made it this far in life. I know this story is long, but I thought I would write it out for those who experience the same thing and also feel as if they have no one to talk to. One thing I've learned growing up was to always speak up and to never give up. Someone will eventually understand and listen to you. As for Rex, he actually still works for my grandmother on the islands. He's 58 now, and he was about 50 when he started to sexually harass me. He still has no wife or children or any family of his own, but my grandmother still shelters and cares for him. I forgive him and everyone else who's done me wrong, but the events definitely impacted my mental state of mind. I'm currently trying to work on my short temper, as well as sometimes overthinking and jumping to conclusions. I'm extremely antisocial, and I'm sometimes overly protective over my younger siblings. I was extremely suicidal until my husband came into my life. At the time, I was cutting myself, and until recently, I've slowed down a lot. I've invested a lot of my time in my spiritual life, and having someone to support me through my recovery journey has been a real gift from God. Rex video calls my family members every now and then, but I try to avoid talking at all. I swear every time I even hear his name, I can't help but have flashbacks of everything he's done to me. I know this isn't your typical scary story, but these experiences were truly scary for me. I've been sexually assaulted, bullied, and unloved within the family, and now things are finally looking up for me. The relationship I now have with my family is getting better, and they're much more supportive now. Well, except for my mother, who just calls to ask for money. But that's a story for another day, I suppose. Please, everyone, if you happen to go through anything similar, speak up. I promise eventually someone will listen. At the time of writing this, my 21st birthday was just a couple of days ago. But this happened last week when I was still 20. I'll be changing all of the names for privacy reasons. My name is Spencer and I'm a transgender man. I work at a rest area cleaning toilets and keeping the place clean. I've known one of my coworkers who we'll call Kevin. Kevin is heavily addicted to meth. It all started last week when I showed up for work and Kevin had just finished working a double shift. He accidentally took the office phone home with him, which we're not supposed to do. I had called Kevin and asked him if he had it, and he said that he did, and he would bring it back when he came to work the night shift that night. For context on this next part, there's a buzzer in the lobby that indicates when the phone is ringing, no matter where the phone is. You always know when it's ringing if you're in the building. The buzzer started going off and it wouldn't stop for at least 5 minutes. About an hour later, the buzzer went off again. I had called my supervisor and told him about what happened and how the phone just wouldn't stop ringing. He said that he would call Kevin and have him bring the phone back. Well, around half an hour later, Kevin returned, put the phone back in the holder, death glared at me, and then said, "Fuck you, Spencer, you stupid ass." I asked him, what the fuck was I supposed to do? The phone wouldn't stop ringing. He then bitched at me for telling on him, and then the look on his face told me that he wanted to kick my ass. Kevin has a history of assaulting people in the past, and there was no way I was going to be the next person he assaulted. I called the police and a trooper came and spoke to me about the incident, and he told me that he'd go talk to Kevin that night. Fast forward the next morning. It was about 6 a.m., and my coworker, who I'll call Bridget, had sent me a chat on Snapchat saying that Kevin was extremely livid and that he was going to apparently beat my ass. He also said that I'm a man wannabe, which is actually a civil crime and gender discrimination in the workplace. I called the office where the cop was based out of, and he later called me back, and I told him about the threat and discrimination. The cops didn't really do that much, and my supervisor just moved Kevin to a different building. I went to the office of the place that I'm contracted with and filed a formal complaint against Kevin. They said they'd bring him into the office and talk to him. I also called the sheriff's office today at the time of writing this and asked to press charges. Well, the only charges they can press is just a simple misdemeanor harassment charge. The discrimination is supposedly a civil matter and that I should talk to an attorney. This incident hasn't been solved to my satisfaction, and I'm constantly looking over my shoulder and worried that Kevin may actually come after me. This may not seem that scary to most of you, but I never thought anything like this would ever happen to me, and that's why I'm as terrified as I am. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to this story, and if you have any recommendations on what I can do, please let me know in the comments section. Hey everyone, sorry for the little interruption, but today's episode is sponsored by ShipStation. Much like producing content like I'm doing on this channel right now and on my podcast, it can take a lot of time and effort. So if you run your own business from home like e-commerce, or maybe you have your own shop on Etsy or Instagram, you can probably relate to that. That's where ShipStation comes in. They can really help you optimize your workflow and help reduce costs as well for your business. I've also got a few close friends who use ShipStation for their businesses, and I've heard nothing but great things, such as an easy-to-use dashboard to help automate all their shipping tasks and much more. You can even save thousands on shipping costs, with discounts up to 89% off UPS, DHL Express, and USPS rates. Go to ShipStation.com and use code Cannibal to sign up for your free 60-day trial. That's ShipStation.com, code Cannibal. My sister, who we'll call Kelsey for privacy reasons, was seeing this dude for a few months. Well, him and Kelsey were doing some illegal activities with each other, and one day he decided that Kelsey was stealing money from him. He calls her to meet him at a store, and Kelsey goes. She leaves her car at the store and then gets into his. He starts driving her around and talking crazy to her, telling her things like he loves her, but she's doing things to him that he doesn't like. Then he pulls out a gun as they're driving down the road to taunt her with it. He tells her that she needs to go into the store and get him some cigarettes and liquor. Kelsey goes in, and while she's in there, she calls our mom. She starts telling her very unusual things like, "I love you, Mom," and that she hopes that we're doing okay. That's when my mom then understands that she's in danger because of the tone of her voice and how it was really shaky and mother's intuition. My cousin was over at the time, and we ran to the store to bring Kelsey's car back to our mom so that she could go get Kelsey. Kelsey had managed to stall until my mom got there, and then they got into the car and sped off. Well, while going down the road, the dude is now shooting his gun out the window while swerving through lanes to reach them. They're going 60 down a 25, running red lights as they're getting shot at. Kelsey's on the phone with the police, and as they get closer to our house, he eventually gives up because the police were just down the block waiting for Kelsey and our mom. Or at least that's what I thought. Before he turned back though to go to his home, he gets to our house and is driving through the alley behind our house, and my cousin and I were scared, feeling like we were going to get hurt because he was around our house. Eventually he left though because Kelsey and our mother got an escort back to the house, and we were told to leave the area for the whole night. This actually made Kelsey have to move to a whole new state. Yeah, it was a pretty crazy time for us. My mother and I still live in the same home with no new issues from the dude. But yeah, Kelsey had to leave. It was pretty crazy. At this time, I was about 13 years old. I grew up a feral Gen X kid in the 90s, and I was unsupervised a lot. We lived in an old farmhouse that was about a mile away from a strip mall and a 7-Eleven. My friends who were just as broke as me and I used to meet up and go wander around the strip mall. Sometimes we'd shoplift, and sometimes we'd just wander around looking at things in Target. Kind of typical suburban kid stuff. The most direct route from the strip mall to my house was a pretty busy main road that went from the highway into farmland. Our old house was positioned right at the border between the town and incorporated boundary, and it was also the last real residential turnoff. The closer you got to my house, the more remote it was. One summer day, after some low hooliganism, I was on the road back to my house. There wasn't much sidewalk, so I was just walking along the shoulder. On my right was a bunch of fields, and then on the left was a garden nursery. I was used to a lot of creepy and unwanted male attention. I hit about 5'7" when I was 12, so from a distance I probably looked a bit older. I was also skinny with long blonde hair and blue eyes. It's possible that I looked maybe 15, but I still looked like a kid. There was this one day when a man in a blue Camaro pulled up next to me. He was a greasy Latino man with long hair, and he looked to be in his late 20s, early 30s.
"Hey baby, want a ride?"
Disgustingly enough, this wasn't the first time I had this happen. I ignored him at first and just kept walking.
"Hey baby, do you want to ride with me? Come on, get in."
He leaned over and went to push open the passenger door. I took this opportunity and then ducked around to the back of his car. I then crossed the street behind him, knowing home wasn't far off. For a quarter of a mile, this man followed me, tried to grab me, tried to push the door into my path, anything he could think to do without getting out of his car. The next road I had to take wasn't nearly as busy. but this meant that his risk as a driver would have been far less if he jumped out of the car and then grabbed me. I was getting more panicked. I neared my house and I didn't see my mom's Jeep in the driveway, which meant I'd be alone. I weighed up either running into the house and hoping I could lock him out before he got to me, the risks of this creepy man knowing where I lived, and whether he'd eventually lose interest in me if I just kept intermittently dodging, ignoring, or telling him no. We kept the back door unlocked and didn't really keep house keys, so who knew what windows or doors were actually locked. I decided to not go into my house. There were a few houses up the road in a small development. I figured I could maybe duck into one of the unfenced backyards or hop one of the smaller ones to get away. There was also a small filbert orchard I guessed that I could disappear into. The man was getting more aggressive, pausing and trying to grab me, screaming at me to get into the car. Any charitable intent that he had started with had totally vanished. This man was desperate to get me into his car and not just for a ride. Thankfully, some of our neighbors were having a garage sale. I took my chance and then yelled, "Oh hey, that's my house!" And I then ran as fast as I could to the house with the sale. I didn't actually know these neighbors, so I was taking an additional chance, but I figured whatever happened to me there was way better than what the man in the car had planned for me. I ran up to who I figured was running the sale, and I then told her that a man was following me. He was idling just beyond their driveway, still leering. I was then ushered into the house and given a soda. I don't know if the owners of the house told this man to get lost, if he thought it was my house, or if he thought there were too many witnesses, maybe all of the above. They told me to stay as long as I wanted and gave me a record to take home. I stuck around for maybe around half an hour after they could promise the man was gone. I walked back home still looking over my shoulder, but everything ended up okay. I wish I could say this was the only time this happened to me, but it wasn't. Lots of men tried to pick me up as I walked. I didn't drive or have a bike, so walking and riding the bus were pretty much my primary modes of transportation. There were only a few others that were aggressive as Camaro Man, and each time I managed to duck them. Funnily enough, I was rescued another night as an adult by ducking into an adult video store and watching the creep on the CCTV cameras pointing at the parking lot. For the love of God, it's fine to offer someone a ride, but if they tell you no, don't push it. And especially don't push it to the point to where someone has to flee and then hide in garages and porn stores. Hey everyone, that's about it for today's stories. If you have your own story that you would like to send, you can send it in at southerncannibal.com, or you can email it at southerncannibalstories@gmail.com. I look forward to telling your story. Have a good night or good day, everyone. And remember to always stay